हम्म, हम्म, ठीक। ओहो, हाँ, काहे इतना जल्दी जल्दी कर रहे हैं? ठीक है, ठीक है। Good morning, everyone. So, today we'll be going ahead with later Vedic phase. So, next most important aspect was of later Vedic phase is the political organization of later Vedic phase. Now, this was the time when the smaller tribes, they were combining together and they were giving a shape to what, to the territory, or rather you can say to the structure, which later came to be known as Janpadas, and Janpadas, they later on developed into Mahajanpadas. This was the time when the very foundation of Mahajanpadas had been laid down. So what were the assemblies which we had talked about in Rig Vedic age? The name of the assemblies, and which of them were attended by women? Anyone? The assemblies of significance during the Rig Vedic age, and the ones which were also where even women had the right to speak, or rather which were even attended by the women. Okay. So, later Vedic age was marked by important political changes, important amendments whenever we talk about political structure. So, assemblies, they lost their importance, and the power of the king, that is the royal power, it increased, which in one way gave way to the despots, the supremacy of the king. King became the center, overall center of everything. Now, once the assemblies, remember when we were discussing Rig Vedic age, we also discussed about one type of assembly, and you need to tell me which one was that, which had a lot of say in the election of the king. Election of the king. Till Rig Vedic age, the kingship was not hereditary. King was elected from among the people. But one of the biggest changes which we see in later Vedic age was that the kingship became hereditary. Now, you need to tell me which was the assembly, which was the tribal assembly, which was that was involved in the election of king. Does anyone remember that? It was Samiti. Now, Vidhata one was one assembly. Vidhata was completely disbanded, or you can say it was relinquished of its role, and it was one of the assemblies which was attended by women as well. Their character changed. Now, one thing is to be remembered that the assemblies they came to be dominated by the princes, the feudal lords, and Brahmins. Okay, so the homogeneous character of the assemblies it ceased to exist. It was not uniform at all. Now, the ordinary citizen they could not participate in the assembly. And women they ceased to be a part of Sabha. Sabha and Vidhata were the two assemblies which were attended by women as well. Even women had the right to speak and participate in these assemblies. We can also say that kingship to a larger extent became hereditary. But still, one thing is to be understood, that traces of king's election is still there. So some texts, in some cases, they still mention about the king's election in later Vedic age. So the condition was, who could be elected as the king? See, when we are talking about Vedic phase and later Vedic age, it was the age of conflict, you can say that, wherein every tribe was trying to extend its territory, they were trying to expand, and in due process, during the expansion process, they used to come into conflict with the neighboring tribes, the neighboring kingdoms, neighboring territories. So the king was supposed to be someone who was physically fit and strong enough to the defend the tribe, as well as someone who looked forward to expanding the territory. So one who was considered the best in king or chief. Okay. Now, the one of the biggest characters of kingship of that time was king did not have a standing army at that point of time. So, how would the king exercise his influence? Or rather, how would the king strengthen his influence over his people, over his territory? What could be the means? Any idea? So, three of the famous rituals were various types of yajnas. One was Rajsuya Yajna, second was Vajpeya Yajna, and third one was Ashwamedh Yajna. So, all of you must be aware of the first and the last one, Rajasuya Yajna, where once a king ascended to the throne, he did this yajna to invoke the belief, or rather to strengthen the belief that his authority is over all the territories which are under his direct rule, and even his even the territories which are indirectly ruled by him, by the feudal lords. Now, Ashwamedh Yajna was the one which was uh, it was done in order to extend the territory. A sacrifice was done, and after that, the horse the horse was set free to roam the territories, and a few soldiers of the king they stayed right behind the horse. The one who held the horse had in any other territory, if some other king, if he used to hold the horse, then he had two options: either to accept the suzerainty of the king who has left the horse, or to fight the king whose whose horse he had held. Now, Vajpaya Yagya is something which you might be finding new. So, Vajpaya Yagya, it was a chariot race wherein king participated and competed against his relatives and king's chariot was allowed to win the race. It was again like stamping his authority over the will of every other person who was contending against him or who was competing against him. Till the Rig Vedic age, we don't hear of the term Rashtra. People were very much imbibed with the thought of family, tribe. We don't hear of Rashtra. For the first time, Rashtra comes into picture was during later Vedic age, and this particular term itself, it made way for the Janpad and then Mahajanpad, and post Mahajanpad, as we get to hear, the empire, Samrajya, Rashtra, Rajya, they all emerged during this phase. And it was because of this particular reason. as we when we will go through the Mahajanpad age, then we will come across some territories like Kuru, Panchal, Matsya. Then this theory that the dominant princes, they gave their name, dominant tribes, the tribes which resided in a particular area, they gave the name of that tribe to that particular territory which they exercised their authority upon. Good morning, Harish. And in fact, as we will see later, the territories, they came to be known by the name of the tribes itself. Whichever tribe ruled that particular area, the original name, it used to stick, it remained so. The tribes which later on came, they never thought of changing the name of that particular territory. So the naming had a certain, you can say, it had a lot to do with the dominance of the tribe which was living in that area. And with this, the term Rashtra. So Rashtra, it appeared for the first time during later Vedic age, and this word Rashtra at that point of time, it meant territory. So apart from the king, so the first was perhaps the most important, Purohita, then Senani, the commander in chief. Another important officer was Sangrihitri, which we have already seen. Because as we know that tribute was not voluntary now, it was made compulsory. It needed to be paid compulsorily. So there was no voluntary payment of tribute, no question of voluntary payment, and every person, they had to pay the bali. This was the time when taxation was in some form or the other, taxation was also imposed upon the people. Now the king, that is the tribal chiefs and the brahmanas, they were also thinking about their income, their source of income, how are they going to earn, and what could be the possible measures taken for possible measures to be considered for the continuance of the earning. Okay, so this is all about later Vedic age polity we have today. In the next class, we'll have an extended session, I think, and we'll be discussing about later Vedic age society and condition of women along with it. And apart from this, we will be discussing about types of questions which have been asked in examinations. Okay. Thank you for today.